This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Potential is a topic that we talk about a ton. It's not something that we talked about much with Watson because either we're talking about what we feel like he is or what we feel like he isn't, but we're not really talking about potential here. And that's what I wanted to kind of broach on today is what is the potential of Deshaun Watson? Where do you feel like he can continue to go to? Where are some areas where he can grow? Where has he gotten better? Where has he gotten worse? Has he regressed in any traits? And where does that put him, given that the last time we really ranked Deshaun Watson within the top 10 of any quarterbacks, like it was in 2020, and from 2020 to now, there's been a lot of quarterbacks that have entered that top quarterback conversation. So that's what I'm going to do here today. We're going to discuss that. And the first thing I want to discuss about this subject in general is how we talk about quarterbacks, because we have this tendency in sports media and as sports fans to label a quarterback one thing and then also tie their potential to whatever we labeled that quarterback, right? Like game manager is one of those terms that's kind of become an insult. Like if I were to say without any context that Tom Brady was a game manager, there would be people furious with me. How dare you insult him? How dare you call it that? When it's not an insult, it's just a classification of how he plays, and it's an accurate classification of how he plays. When we're talking about game manager, we're talking about quarterbacks who thrive in their pre-processing ability, who play well in structure, who when things are around them, they can play great, but also need a good structure around them, need good pre-snap reads, need good pre-processing. Peyton Manning was a very similar quarterback. To me, a better description of what Tom Brady is instead of just a game manager, because every quarterback has to manage a game. A better description of that to me would be a pre-processor. This is a quarterback who does well pre-snap, who does all the things and can figure out all the things pre-snap. They struggle when it comes to being forced to rely on their post-snap abilities or when pre-snap things get taken away or when their pre-snap reads aren't right. You can be a game manager or pre-processor and have the potential that's unlimited. We saw this with Tom Brady, who was certifiably a game manager at the beginning of his career and was still a game manager by the end of his career, but still at the same time, despite that classification, was one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. You can say the same thing about Peyton Manning, who also managed games, who also pre-processed things and relied on his pre-processing ability, his timing with his receivers, and all of those things in order to enhance what he has or doesn't have physically. Then there are guys who are post-processing, guys who are more comfortable making plays after the ball is snapped, figuring out things after the ball snapped. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't do any pre-processing. They don't even think. They're not even intelligently going through the game. They very much are. They're just doing it at a different time of the play. Both of these styles are fine. I think there are plenty of successful quarterbacks who pre-process. There's plenty of successful quarterbacks who post-process, right? On one end of the spectrum, you have Tom Brady. On the other end of the spectrum, you have Pat Mahomes. On one end of the spectrum, you have Peyton Manning and Drew Brees. On another end of the spectrum, you have Ben Roethlisberger. And then in the middle of that spectrum, because again, it's a spectrum, you're not just locked in, you could be a little bit of both. But on that spectrum, somebody who sits relatively in the middle of it is like an Aaron Rodgers, a playmaker, but also a very good game manager. The reason I think of this as a spectrum and the reason I'm bringing this up in the context of talking about Deshaun Watson's potential is while it's important to know where your quarterback naturally sits when it comes to their play style, what they're comfortable with, right? What their bread and butter is going to be. It's also important to know that that quarterback, in order to win a championship, can't just be one thing. You can't just be post-processor play, make plays at the snap and win, throw that all the way to a Super Bowl. Same way you can't just pre-process your way to a Super Bowl. Tom Brady had to make plays when things broke down to get to a Super Bowl. He had to post-process to get there. He had to get in that other spectrum to get there. Pat Mahomes has had times where he's got to game manage to win the game, right? Did that both the last 2 games of the season. Pat Mahomes is out there managing the game. Of course, he's a playmaker. Of course, he's capable of that, but he has to be comfortable doing that. With Deshaun Watson, his potential is going to lay in his comfortability with both of those concepts. I think the good news for Browns fans is if you watch him last year, I think there's signs that he was finding some comfort doing the other end of the spectrum. We all know that Deshaun Watson is more of a post-processor. We all know that he is more on the game changer play style than the game manager play style. But the truth is, if Deshaun Watson wants to get to where he wants to get to, he's going to have to be comfortable managing games, and he's going to have to be comfortable changing games, right? Because the problem with the game changer is that if you change the game too much, you end up changing it in a negative effect for your team. Josh Allen is a big example of this. Josh Allen has not gotten to a Super Bowl, despite the fact that he's more talented, throws the ball further, more accurate than Joe Burrow. But Joe Burrow has gotten to a Super Bowl because Joe Burrow knows when he just needs to manage the game, when he needs to not turn the ball over, when he needs to be real boring with his throws, right? 10 yards here, 5 yards here, 6 yards there. And he got to take those little chunks. And that's why he's been able to beat Pat Mahomes, despite the fact that he's not better than Pat Mahomes. He's not more talented than Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, but he's been the one guy in the AFC that's been able to have it happen for him, not named Tom Brady, because he understands that balance when he needs to be Joe Burrow, the playmaker, and when he needs to be Joe Burrow, the game manager, right? If you don't have that balance, you run into issues during a playoff tournament. That's why Josh Allen is where he is. That's why Deshaun Watson's had some of the things in the playoffs happen to him, right? He had a great comeback against Buffalo. He had another guy, he had Pat Mahomes make a great comeback against him. I bet at that point, when he was up 20, he thinks to himself, maybe I should get better at managing this game. Because if you manage the game better, maybe you beat Kansas City and you get to the AFC Championship. He's going to have to be comfortable managing the game. He's going to have to be comfortable playing in structure. It's not something that he can run away from. And I don't think that's what the Browns are doing, right? There was this call for Deshaun Watson to basically surround himself with the same people he was with in Houston, because people just want the production, right? I think a lot of people are frustrated that the production hasn't been there when it comes to raw yards and touchdowns. We're talking about a guy who had 5,000 passing yards his last year in Houston, and he has not even been on pace to do that. I think he was on pace this year for 3,000. So people are upset with the production, and they think going back to Houston will fix the production. And they're probably right. Deshaun Watson will have probably much more production, much more yards for sure, if he goes back to just doing exclusively what he did in Houston. But what you don't guarantee, and what you aren't putting yourself in a good position to do if you do that, is having the chance for Deshaun Watson to take you in the playoffs further than where he's been before. Because his play style in Houston was not a play style, to me, that was sustainable for Super Bowls, right? He took too many sacks. He got hit behind the line of scrimmage too much. He set you behind. Like, those things matter. He wasn't managing the game well. It's great that he could be a game changer. It's great that he could play make. He was playmaking like the best of them in 2019, 2020, 2018, for sure. One of the best playmakers in the NFL, up there with even what Pat Mahomes was doing at that time. But making plays isn't everything. You also need to be able to manage the game. And the one thing I hope that he takes away from the last 2 years of being in Stefanski's more strict, more of a system that you're used to seeing game managers run, is managing games. And I thought that we saw some progress with him doing it, significant progress with him being able to manage games this season. And that's why I'm more up on his potential than down. See, people look at what he did this season, they don't see the spectacular numbers, and they think to themselves, well, he stunk. Because you want the spectacular, you want 300 yards, you want 4 touchdowns, and I don't see it like that. I want to watch the game. I want to see how he managed the game, how he processed the game. Did he make the plays that needed to be made in the course of that game, or did he shy away from them? And when I watch the games back, he's making those plays. It's not spectacular yardage, it's not spectacular things, but it is good game management. One game he was terrible game management was the Pittsburgh game, right? Terrible game management in that one. But every other game, he managed the game pretty well that he started and finished. Thought he did a great job in doing that. And to me, that's why I'm more up on his potential, because he always needed to add that element to his game. The Browns aren't going to win a Super Bowl with Deshaun Watson. It's going back to what worked in Houston. It's not a Super Bowl champion. What you need to do if you're the Cleveland Browns is have a quarterback there who can make plays when he needs to, but also can manage the game. That's what makes the Bengals a threat to Kansas City and not the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills just as good as the Bengals, but they can't get past Kansas City or anybody serious because Josh Allen don't manage them games well. Josh Allen ain't guaranteed to hold on to a lead. The thing that's encouraging about Deshaun Watson is that he had a plus 63-point differential when he was out there. It's the same thing that the Kansas City Chiefs had. Now, some people might say, oh, he was playing bad teams. That's my point exactly. The Browns played bad teams after Deshaun Watson got hurt. They even played bad teams with Joe Flacco, and they didn't always blow those bad teams out because Joe Flacco was turning the ball over a ton when he was here. And look, Joe Flacco played as good as you could expect a dude coming from raising a family and being retired to do. Not slighting him, but that's what you missed from Deshaun Watson this year was his ability to manage a game, take care of the football. We talked about it all season. If he can have that element in there, right? Be a solid game manager, know what he can do with it. He did a great job of it. I thought a high level job of managing the game versus the Baltimore Ravens this year in the second half, right? He tried to play make in the first half. It wasn't happening. They weren't letting it happen. He didn't have the success. The wide receivers couldn't get open. He wasn't making the throws. Okay, it's not happening. So in the second half, he manages the game. Short throws, short runs, first downs, check downs, first downs, check downs, touchdown. And he managed the game to victory. The same way you've seen Pat Mahomes go, okay, I can't make plays. I'm going to manage the game to victory. I'm not saying he's Pat Mahomes. Don't even get that out of this. No quarterback is in the tier of Pat Mahomes, but that's what's necessary, right? You can't just be a game changer. You can't just be a game manager. Right? The reason Kirk Cousins struggles to get out the first round of the playoffs is, well, when it comes time for him to make a play, he's not comfortable making a play. He'd rather throw a check down on 4th and 10 than try to make a play. And that's why he can't win in the playoffs. But the same thing is kind of true for Josh Allen. Hell, Lamar Jackson, same thing, right? What happened with Lamar Jackson? All they had to do was manage that game versus Kansas City. They probably beat the Chiefs, but Lamar wanted to make the big play. Threw an interception in the double coverage for no damn reason. You got to do both. You got to be good at making plays. You got to manage the game. And I think these last couple of years, Deshaun Watson has learned how to manage a game better than what he was doing in Houston. Now that we're going to add some things to put him in his comfort zone, to get him to play make a little bit more, get him in the position to play make more. Hopefully you can merge the best of both worlds there. Now, that being said, let's say we live in a world where he's managing the game well and he's also playmaking. Where does that put him when it comes to the grander class of quarterback? Obviously, he's not in the same tier with Pat Mahomes. I don't know if he's ever going to be in the MVP conversation. And I'm not just saying like, the media ain't never going to vote for him to be in the MVP conversation. I'm just saying, I don't know if his play ever gets to the point to where it makes a compelling argument for him to be the MVP of the league. Simply because one, he's 28, 29, like he's getting older. He's not going to put up those kind of numbers anymore. And then two, his team's too good. You know what I mean? Like the statement that a lot of people use with Deshaun's like, oh, he never carried his team to victory. But the Browns have a really, really good roster. And when you have a roster that's that good, it doesn't require that they be carried to victory. We saw this team go 11-6 with basically everybody injured. Like, that's how talented this roster is. And that's to my second point. Since the roster is so talented, we don't need him to be Pat Mahomes. We don't need him to be 2021 Joe Burrow. We don't need him to be Lamar Jackson. If he can get in that same class of quarterback that Justin Herbert's in, that Jalen Hurts was in, that Brock Purdy is in, you have a chance to win it all. Because you don't need to have a quarterback that can outplay Pat Mahomes. But you do need a quarterback who can make the plays when the Chiefs give them up. Joe Burrow's not a better quarterback than Pat Mahomes. He's not even close to being the type of quarterback that Pat Mahomes is. They're not even in the same universe. But Joe Burrow has been able to beat the Kansas City Chiefs and Pat Mahomes in the playoffs on the biggest stage because Joe Burrow managed the game, didn't make the big turnovers, didn't let his eyes get too big, knew when to turn that switch on and off. And that's what you need out of Deshaun Watson in order to get past him. I've seen signs that it's going to be able to happen. I don't know if he's going to be a high-level manager of the game while also being a high-level playmaker. But what I do know is that there's enough there to be really damn good. One of the best 8 quarterbacks in the NFL. He has the potential to be. That's not a guarantee that he gets there, but this is a conversation about his potential, and I think that's where his potential can sit. Now, some may say potential doesn't just sit in one direction. You know, it can go in the negative direction as well, and that's true. If I had to put some words on his potential in the opposite direction, I would say this. I think his floor is not that low, right? Last year, the numbers weren't spectacular. He was basically managing games, making plays that needed to be made. And he was pretty good for the Browns. They had a plus 63-point differential, and they probably compete for the division. So I don't think the floor with him is as low as people are trying to make it out to be, especially with this talented team that the Browns have. So like his floor to me would probably be above like the floor of a Trevor Lawrence or something like that. It'd probably be like, okay, he'll be a 4,000 yard passer or a 3,500 yard passer with low numbers, but they get the job done, right? You make the playoffs, you'll probably be either a home playoff team or not. I think, you know, as long as he stays healthy, the floor with him is still pretty high because he has gotten and made significant steps from what I've seen and his ability to manage the game. Now, he has faux pas for sure in the middle of that, but for the most part, the work is very solid in his ability to manage the game. But that's just my thoughts on his potential. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, because this is one subject that is most certainly up for debate. There's not a definitive answer one way or the other. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.